Okay. Can you start off by saying your names? Your full names.
I'm Bonnie Ward Klehr.
Cheryl, Acton, Harbour.
Patsy, Henderson Bowles.
And then what was your addresses growing up?
1345 Parkside Drive, Park Ridge, Illinois.
I was 222 North Seminary in Park Ridge.
And I was about a block away at 109 North Home Avenue.
What schools did you attend with Hillary?
Maine East.
And Maine East was the first one, although Patsy and I were in Sunday school with her from first grade on.
Yeah, it would be, the first school we went together was high school, Maine East.
So what is your earliest memory of Hillary?
We were in class, well, I met her in the halls as we did in groups, and my first memory is that I thought she was cute and fun. And we served on student council together, and she really was a good worker. I was a better player. And we worked together on school dances, decorating the gym, projects like that. I couldn't even remember all of the projects we worked on.
Well, I do remember her from first grade, and remember particularly that her mother was our Sunday school teacher, and she was just an amazingly wonderful woman. And so I think at that time I felt like Hillary was one of the other little girls in class. You know, by first grade she was just pretty much like everyone else. And then in high school got to know her through classes and student council, and saw her bloom through 4 years, and was impressed with a lot of things that she did, a lot of activities, and as Bonnie said, she was a hard worker, and that came through real clearly.
And I too met her for the first time in first grade through church. We went to the First Methodist Church of Park Ridge, and her mother was our Sunday school teacher, and then so we were in choir together. We also started something, well, we didn't start, but our youth minister started something called University of Life, I think it was, where we went to homes and did worship kinds of things, but also did exploring of the mind kinds of things, I'd like to say. And we had a particularly excellent youth minister by the name of Don Jones, and maybe some of you have heard about him before, but so that was, you know, we were all introduced to him at the same time, and Hillary was sort of in that group, where he took us downtown to see Martin Luther King. This was before high school, I believe. I think we might have been 13 or 14 years old. We were able to shake his hand, which was really kind of neat. But the first school I went with her to was Maine East as a freshman. So we would school together at Maine East, but knew her through church mostly.
Compared to other students and other people your age, what was she like? What stood out about her?
How smart she was. She was very smart, don't you think?
I do, yeah.
I was just telling Cheryl on the way here in the car, you know, we all have an aha moment about somebody. And I wasn't in a lot of the same classes that she was in, so I really didn't get to see her perform academically, like maybe, you know, Cheryl might have been in some of the same classes, but I can remember we had an all-school assembly, and this was when there were 5,000 kids at Maine East, and we had 1,100 in our junior class. Excuse me. And so we had an all-school assembly, and Jesse Owens was going to be our speaker. He was an Olympian. And so Hillary was the one who was going to introduce him and, you know, give a little background on him. And so I'm sitting there in the audience, and there's 5,000 kids and faculty, you know, watching. And she stood up, and she did an introduction like I couldn't believe. No notes. And she was so poised. I was just sort of taken back because I thought she's the same age I am. I think we're about 17 years old, and here she is, addressing 5,000 kids and faculty and doing such a wonderful job. And I thought, oh my gosh, she is so far above where I am. And so that was kind of my first moment of thinking, wow, she's really got a command and a presence and knows what she's talking about. And so that was, if you have an aha moment, I think that was probably mine.
So I have an impression, I'm not sure I'd call it an aha moment. I was in a lot of classes with her through the 4 years, but one particularly stands out in my mind. It was a government class, interestingly enough, and we had this was our senior year, and we had a teacher named Cheryl Baker, and he was young. He was probably 6 years older than the rest of us. He just, I think, was out of college, and he was presenting ideas that were maybe different than what we all heard at home. We were very Republican, and he would present ideas, and Hillary would sometimes debate him about things, not because she was a Democrat at the time, just because she was really well informed. And so it was almost like she was a co-teacher for that class. The rest of us were learning, and she was already pretty well familiar with the concepts, had her own opinions, and she and the teacher would almost carry the conversation.
Was that one? Did Gerald do a debate with you?
Yeah, he did. With the election, he did a mock election, and he had people do a mock debate. They had to represent the two sides, the Republican and Democratic side, and I believe Hillary was one of those speakers. And I'm not sure which side she represented, but we voted, and the Republican won. And I remember reading afterwards, I'm not sure I was aware of this at the time, that he was a little disappointed because he thought we all vote like our parents.
Right.
Even though we had the debate, but the debate was interesting, but then he thought we all went, we went to the polls and voted just like our parents were.
You wouldn't happen to know, was that a girl or boy who Hillary debated in that instance? Do you know?
I think there were actually more than one person. I think
Okay.
they had a side.
Okay.
Yeah, and so there were girls and boys
Okay.
in both of them. That was one of the things that was, I think, unusual about us at the main schools at that time of history, is that girls were really active in everything. We had student council that had to be equal, girls and boys.
Okay.
And proportional representation. They tried to represent all the towns that fed into Maine East, and girls were often the committee chairman and the leaders and things, and we didn't know that was unusual at that time. But I think it was a great basis for all of us, and probably a great basis for her, sent her off in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember our debate team, we'd have big debate teams, and often you would change your view by the end of, however many days that ran. But I remember we did capital punishment, and I changed my mind afterwards. And so one side could really, if they could argue a really good, have good reasons for their argument, you might change your mind. And I thought that was our senior year we were doing debate teams.
I wasn't, but
You weren't,
I'm glad
but
you were.
probably,
It's a good thing to do.
yeah, it was great. It was great.
Well, see, your senior year, you were at Maine East.
Yes,
And our senior year,
You were-
Cheryl and I were at Maine South,
right.
because they had split the class up, which was
But
really
Yeah.
sad.
That was sad. I think we did a junior year too, though.
Yeah.
Well, there were so many activities here. I'm sure it's the same way here. So many activities that you could do that you couldn't possibly do them all. But there was something for everyone. It was amazingly, it was almost like there was a message that out there that said, don't just stand there, do something. People were all, you go through the yearbook and people have 12 numbers after their name for pictures on the pages. And so, you couldn't do everything, but.
No, we were busy.
And then what about Hillary's appearance? Did she fit in like with all the other girls, or did something also stand out about that?
Did you say her appearance?
Yes.
Oh, well, I don't know that she really stood out. The only thing is, she wore glasses, but I think back in those days, we didn't have contacts, did we?
No.
We didn't have contact lenses, so anybody who had anything wrong with their eyes wore glasses. And of course, Hillary's glasses were kind of thick, but there were several people who probably had thick glasses. And I think we had the big frames and all of those things back then. So I don't think she particularly stood out because, a lot of people had problems with their eyes. But
She doesn't, if you look through the yearbook pictures, she doesn't usually have her glasses on.
No, she doesn't.
She takes them off.
She was cute. She was
Yeah,
really
yeah.
cute.
Did Betsy tell you that story about when they would be going from class to class and she would take off her glasses? Did she? Oh, this is kind of funny. Betsy and Hillary. Betsy is Hillary's really, really good friend. And they'd be walking, from class to class, and Hillary would always want to take off her glasses because she didn't like to be seen with her glasses on if she didn't have to. So, they'd kind of be sort of walking close to each other, and there'd be a boy that would pass by, and Hillary would say, "Who was that?" They just said hi to me, "Who was that?" And so Betsy would kind of say, "Well, that was Jim." She said, "Oh, hi, Jim."
Betsy was a guide friend.
She was kind of like her guide dog. So,
Yeah, she would say that.
yeah, she would
She'd
take her glasses off.
From
I think a
class to
lot of
class.
kids who wore glasses
Yeah.
probably were,
Well, she's not wearing glasses today.
self-conscious about it. Yeah.
And we are.
Yeah,
There
and
we go.
she never wore makeup, but, a lot of us in those days, we didn't wear a
No,
lot
we
of.
weren't quite such fashionistas as
We
today.
didn't wear a lot of makeup in high school. I think kids now in junior high are probably putting makeup on, but we didn't. And she always had a headband on, not always, but a lot of times would have a headband on. That was kind of her MO.
That was the look, too.
Yeah, I have one kind of funny memory regarding her appearance. And it's a joke among all of us now, a friendly, affectionate joke, that fashion is not her thing. She's had to sort of be aware of it because of her public image and all that kind of thing, but I don't even think it was back then. So 2 years into college, the local paper, the Park Ridge Herald or whatever it was, did a little feature article, and they just interviewed 4. I happened to be one of them. Hillary happened to be one of them, and asked us the fashion trends of our college. So it was funny at the time, but we both were kind of good sports and answered. I was a little more, fashion conscious than she was, but my mother, the only reason I remember this, because my mother, how mothers are, saved the article, and I read it not too long ago, and she only saved my interview, of course, as mothers would. So I said that I recommended culottes. And I'm so sad that I don't have Hillary's answer for what she recommended to go to college. Yeah, we'll have to,
Do you all know what culottes are? You've seen culottes? I can remember, we had a dress code when we were in school.
Yes, we did.
And I can remember wearing culottes to school, and that's that skirt that's got kind of that split up the front. And
Well,
it
they're
was,
pants, actually wide pants,
yeah,
culottes.
or it looked like a skirt if your legs were together,
Yeah.
So anyway, but you had to have
Your knees
your knees covered, so the skirts had to go just below your knee. Well, I wore culottes to school one day, and it
Too
was just
short.
like either at my knee or just a little bit above my knee. So the dean of women,
yeah.
girls, called me in, and I had to take out the hem. And so I had to walk around with
Oh, yeah.
this, ratty-looking hem thing on the bottom of my, because they were very strict about it.
Very strict.
We couldn't, let's see, I'm
I
trying
got
to-
called down one day, and
What was the
because my
dress
knee
code?
was showing, but I was a cheerleader. So then they
Well,
went,
girls
well,
couldn't wear slacks.
we were given our skirt.
Guys couldn't wear jeans.
Yeah, you couldn't wear
No.
Bermudas when it got.
Yeah, and there was some rumor, I don't remember ever seeing this happen, but I remember coming away with the idea that your skirt had to hit the floor if you kneeled on the floor. Like if you kneeled on the floor, your skirt had to touch the floor. That was the way they could measure. I don't remember ever having to do that or seeing it, but that was supposedly.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
definite. I mean,
Definitely your
you
knees
would
had to
get-
be
You
covered
would get
for
called
sure.
in if your dress was not,
If
what
your
you were
teacher
wearing was
just
not.
noticed you walking down the hall and saw your knee,
Yeah.
you were,
Yeah, they'd report you.
yeah, you get it right away, you'd go down right to the dean.
You're all shaking your heads.
I know, it is shocking, isn't it?
Times
Is it a
they
little
are
different
changing.
today?
I mean,
Well,
they
something
barely
like that,
enforce
right?
the dress code now.
Yeah.
They barely.
I mean, we
do.
didn't have to
It's
wear hats
ridiculous.
and white gloves, we weren't that old, but, yeah, we did have to wear skirts, and
We had to wear
and the
skirts.
boys had to wear pants, not jeans.
Yes, you can't
No
wear,
one
you
could
couldn't wear jeans. I remember one person wearing jeans. Jeans were not the fashion. You only wore jeans if you were really poor.
Or doing work, like work jeans, right?
Right, I mean, if you were on a farm
Pitching
or
hay.
something. But the one boy who should remain nameless, wore jeans, and so I thought he was poor, but later to find out he was extraordinarily wealthy, and his parents were always traveling the world, so he was basically dressing himself, and he chose jeans.
Could boys wear t-shirts? I don't think they could even
I
wear
don't
t-shirts.
even think there were
They
t-shirts.
had to
T-shirts
wear-
were undershirts.
Yeah, they were undershirts then. They were, you just didn't wear a t-shirt. You had to have it
No.
underneath a shirt.
Yeah.
So, yeah, times have changed.
Yeah, times have changed.
Did Hillary ever get in trouble for that or any sort of thing at all?
Not that I know of. Not that I know. She was a rule follower, I think.
She was.
Well,
She
I
was-
think we were all rule followers.
We were all rule followers,
Yeah.
yeah, except that day that I didn't.
Yeah, that was a pretty big,
That was wild.
That was really big.
That was wild.
No,
No,
we
there,
were, I would have to say, we were all pretty much followed the rules that we were given. There was very little back talking to teachers, very
Never.
little inappropriate language. We didn't even know what some of the words are that you all are using back in the day that we were in high school. It was just different.
It was different. It was very strict. I mean, if you wouldn't want to disappoint your parents, for sure. And so getting in trouble in school,
Mhm.
although I started to smoke my senior year. And that was,
And did you
now
get
I
caught?
look, never, I never smoked in school, because if you smoked in school, you were suspended. They just threw you out. If they smelled smoke, yeah. I remember there was a girl that went into a ladies' room and smoked, and they just came in and got her. And I
never
go,
saw her again.
Yeah.
I'm sure she came back.
But
I
there were
never smoked
there
in
were
school.
very few people that did smoke, really. Don't you
Well,
think?
you didn't do it
But I
on
don't-
campus.
I-
You couldn't even do it in the car
I don't think
outside,
there were not.
in the parking lot, if you got caught, if somebody saw you. So you
See,
had
I
to
don't even remember.
Well, Bonnie knew the smokers.
Oh,
We
maybe
didn't
I
know.
be. No,
Cheryl and I didn't know
I
the
dated an older guy, and
So when Maine South and Maine East split, did was there like a kind of a cultural shift between the school, or was like the dress code was equally important in both places?
Oh, I think probably the dress code was the same in both schools, and, it was really tough when we split, because, even though we had 1,100 kids in our junior class, somehow we felt like we knew everybody pretty well. I mean, it's hard to say that, but I think we
Yeah, it's
felt
not
like
true.
we
I'm
did.
still meeting people for the first time at reunions.
But people
That's 'cause
probably
we
that
don't
you did
remember.
know, but now
Yeah,
it's been.
and they really try to make it gentle for us. We've had reunions together ever since then, our whole
So we
class.
have Maine East and Maine South reunions together.
well, we were split, and we
Yeah.
had been friends
Bonnie
forever.
stayed at Maine
I
East her
stayed
senior
here.
year, and Cheryl and I went to
Yeah.
Maine South, so, we were really good friends. It was hard to, not see your friends that you were used to seeing on a daily basis. But on the other hand, it was kind of neat, because we got, at Maine South, we got to choose the colors, the mascot, the school song,
The trouble is, I can still sing the Maine East fight
Yeah.
song. I can't tell you the Maine South.
because
fight
we
song.
were here 3 years.
Yes, right.
But I
could
think I
still sing it
remember we
too,
were
knowing
going,
you wanna hear
there
it.
was a big controversy about, because we had to pick the school name, or the team name, like, it came out to be the Hawks. But at first, we were talking about the Rebels.
Yeah, they wouldn't let us
And
have that as a.
They wouldn't let us have that because it was too divisive. It was not a good name. So we had to do something a little bit more benign, so we came up with the Hawks. But everything that school has today, the cheers and some of the pom-pom stuff that Cheryl did, they're probably still doing that today.
Patsy was a cheerleader. Cheryl was a pom-pom girl. I was a cheerleader. We had to behave, I think.
How did Hillary take the split? between your junior class?
Oh, it was difficult for all of us. It really was. I don't know, you can look at it in two ways. It was really difficult for us, friends-wise, because we had to split those friendships up, although we still did get together with some of our friends. But it was kind of neat because we were starting a brand-new school and able to, come up with all of these unique and interesting things for that school. And they're there today.
And she was actually chairman of the organizations committee for student council, and I think was on a special small group that put together bylaws for student council and that kind of thing. So she took a leadership role back then. And she was even, they formed a committee, there had been a little bit of vandalism, and she was on a committee, asked to be on it or volunteered, I'm not sure. And she was with a small group of students that came up with an anti-vandalism policy or campaign. I think it was more a campaign to get students to stop doing that because they would have pride in their school. So she did that, I think, the summer between our junior and senior year.
So like socially, what can you just kind of touch on that? Like what was your social life like? What was it like hanging out with like your group of friends and with Hillary, and how the split affected that, but also just kind of what it was like?
As I look back, a lot of us had a great social life, and we had a lot of friends. I mean, we did things with a lot of people. We did have, I hate to call it a clique because it was so big. A clique, when I think of, is something like 3 or 4 people or
And
something.
not with real firm lines either.
No.
People were friends with people.
Yeah,
all
you
over the
just
place.
had, so, I could have 50 friends, Cheryl could have 50 good friends. It was just, but out of those 50, you may have had some that were just a little bit closer, because Cheryl and I lived close together. Bonnie and I were good friends. But as far as, going out and doing things, we did it with groups of girls. Sometimes the guys would come with us too. It didn't necessarily have to be a date. So we did a lot of things with the guys, parties or going out. And some of us dated some of the guys, and some of us just were friends with the guys. So dating was a whole lot different back then, I think, than it
Yeah, you didn't,
is
as a
now.
girl, you didn't go to a school dance unless a guy invited you.
And there were rules,
Yeah?
2 weeks ahead, right? They had to ask you 2 weeks ahead.
And you didn't go to someone's home if their parents weren't there,
No.
because your parent would call and make sure that their parents were there before you went over. So, it was much more controlled.
And I think a lot of our social life really was school-oriented. It was
Dances.
athletic things, dances. I had a lot of school dances. I don't know how it is here now, but I remember when my own kids were in high school, they had trouble sometimes getting the kids to come to the dances. But and those, when we were here, that was the basic social life.
How often would you have them?
Oh,
Like school
we had,
dances?
we had
Kick off-
homecoming,
well,
we had
kick off
Thanksgiving,
first, kick off, and then homecoming, then Thanksgiving.
then the
Christmas,
Christmas.
and
So
then
before
girls'
Christmas, you would have
choice.
4 big dances. Yeah.
Girls' choice, and what, leap year, around leap year, there was where the girls did all the asking,
Valentine's
the
Day
planning.
dance.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Sock hops after
maybe we
games.
had 8. And then the sock hops were just little things,
After games in
Yeah,
the field house
yeah.
or whatever.
yeah. And pep rallies, pep rallies before the game, sock hops after the game. Yeah, they kept us busy. I mean, you really had a good social life, just around the school. You didn't have to go anywhere else.
And I really think during the week, because of this abundance of activities, people were generally not going out on dates or anything during the week, or even when we were younger, we used to go to a place and have a Coke and French fries,
Right.
just with our friends. But I think in high school, even some of that got cut back, because if you were in a club or on, cheerleaders or pom-pom or something, you were practicing every day.
Yeah.
You met every day after school. So there wasn't a lot of just hanging out, I don't think.
No, there was no time for hanging out. You went to your practice or your club, and then you went home and did your homework, and that was it. And you were back the next day. Our time was filled.
Did you, one of the people we interviewed, there's some like teen dance clubs that were off, there was a bunch of those. There was some in Park
Well,
Ridge.
we had some at, what's the park? West Park.
West Park?
West Park, which is now a community center. Is that what it is?
Centennial, I
On
think
Toohey
now.
Avenue.
Well, actually, that
Yeah.
was the Y, wasn't it? Or what, just West Park where the pool was?
Yeah, well, the
Well,
Y, I guess, yeah.
But
West
we'd
Park
go
was
to the
behind.
Y on Friday nights,
Yeah.
and they played records, and we danced.
Yeah, the windows would
It's
get all
great.
steamed up.
And
All the kids were
hope
just
that the guy
piled in
you
there.
liked would ask you to dance,
Huh?
because we never asked them to dance. You
Yeah.
hoped. You'd just sit there. Oh, that was,
And you did that when you were too young to date, when your parents wouldn't let you go out yet.
Yeah.
You could go to the
They would-
Y and
yeah, they would
meet up
take you to
with
the
your-
Y and
Because it
drop
was
you off.
supervised, it was supervised.
Right, and then you would be picked up by the parents, and if the dancing wasn't going well, you could go jump on the trampoline. Yeah,
Yeah.
I did that a couple
Actually,
nights too.
I think at the Y, they actually let you swim. I mean, if you.
Yes, oh yes,
if
you
did-
could swim, but the hair, I never swam.
I always swam.
You're braver than me.
So besides like school events and clubs, did you guys ever go to each other's houses? Like, have you ever met Hillary's parents?
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell us a
We used to
little
have
bit?
slumber parties. Slumber parties were big, where that was obviously not co-ed, that was all the girls. And, you stay overnight and you do all the things like hide people's clothes and all that stuff.
Stay up late.
you know.
Stay up all night,
Yeah, we had a lot of slumber parties.
yeah.
What was her since you like knew her parents and like from church, like what was her family dynamic like?
I only met her mom because her mom was my Sunday school teacher. And then I got to know her dad just a little bit after she was in the White House and with Bill. And then I knew her two brothers, but not well, because they went to school here too. They were in different grades. But her mother was a lovely person.
Mhm.
Her mother was a very lovely person, as sweet as she could be.
Yeah, she was a fabulous woman. Do you know her history, her mother's history? Yeah, she came from very dire straits, and she was a success. She really saw all the good, any good things that came her way, she took advantage of, and I think she's an example for everyone. Because she could have really been bitter and hateful, and she had been given away by her parents to her grandparents. And then her grandparents weren't thrilled to have her either. And she and her sister split up. It's just so sad. And yet she had a wonderful, successful life and wonderful
She
children.
persevered.
Yeah, she did.
And I think the reason that we don't know her dad too much was because that was sort of part of society too. The dads
Mhm,
weren't
that's
around
true.
much. They were the breadwinners, and the moms were more in charge of the children. But his personality is pretty well known to us because we've heard about him. He was, kind of a gruff, earthy guy, and not in a bad way, but I think she had two interesting influences. She had a mom who was very encouraging and supportive, and she had a dad who was kind of demanding, if you brought home an A-, why wasn't it an A, that kind of thing. And I think she took some of both of their philosophies, and that was probably very motivating for her, both things.
The dads weren't, in my house either. They just weren't into I know that my daughter and son-in-law, their children, they're into all their activities, they know, and they both show up at everything. But my dad, he showed up a couple cheerleading and homecoming, but
A lot of
really-
a lot of our mothers didn't work. They were
none of
home.
them worked. that I-
Very few. They
Yeah,
were
very
mostly
few.
home,
Yeah.
doing the washing and the ironing and the cooking.
And the dads weren't that active in participating in our lives, really.
And the moms were, PTO chairman or whatever, and Girl Scout leaders
Girl
and all
Scout
that.
leader,
My mom
yeah.
was actually a school secretary in Park Ridge School, so she worked, but she chose that so that she could have the same vacations as we did and basically the same hours.
And keep her eye on you.
She would never be in the same school I was. That was sort of our
That
rule.
was good, that was good.
Yeah, you mentioned Girl Scouts. Were you in Girl Scouts with Hillary or?
I wasn't in Girl Scouts with Hillary, but I was in Girl Scouts, yeah. Was Hillary a Girl Scout?
I don't know.
Yeah, that was pretty well divided by elementary schools.
Uh-huh.
And we went to
Yeah.
Carpenter and you went to, what's?
I went to
what's it?
Franklin
Franklin, and she
Yeah.
went to what did she go to?
Field.
Field.
Field, yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much neighborhood oriented, those activities.
Do you have any stories about how you and Hillary and Student Council like work together on any dances or things like that?
Well, I remember we were decorating for a dance. It had to be in the fall. I think it was Thanksgiving dance, and we had tons of crepe paper. Do you know what crepe paper is? Does anybody know what crepe paper is?
Bonnie's an
It
artist.
came in-
Bonnie's an artist, so
It
she
came,
knows.
it came in rolls, and then you would unwind it and you'd twist it, and then somehow you'd get a ladder and you'd thumbtack it to the
And
ceiling.
voila.
You'd have to figure all that out. So that we worked on that together. And I know I got tired of working on it before she did. So she was definitely much more goal-oriented than I was. And we just had a lot of fun doing it, and I am an artist, and because of that, I always saw things differently for some reason. And I had a different idea.
Did you design the floats? Did they ever get you?
Oh,
hooked into
yeah,
that?
yeah, I did the floats. I haven't thought of the floats in 1,000 years. Oh my gosh.
Those were projects.
Those were huge projects.
We
made
had wonderful floats.
out of chicken wire.
Yeah.
And crepe paper.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there was a lot of crepe paper, but then there was also this paper that you would twist, and then you'd stick it in each of the holes.
Chicken wire.
Chicken
opening,
wire.
Yeah.
hole. I mean, you'd work, whoever had it, my aunt had it at her house, and so you would work weeks on the float, and it couldn't get wet, of course, because it was made
They
of
say it's someone's large garage, it would be in there. Isn't that what they did?
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, I never even thought of that. No, but we did work on student council together, I can say that, and she was a great worker. And we had a good time together. And the floats,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes,
There's a
I-
memory out of the past that,
As I look back on student council, that's one of the things that doesn't surprise me about her now. Because she was someone who I think really wanted to get things done. A lot of student council was sometimes mostly social for some people. But there were people who, staffed the committees, worked on things, and she was someone who would take on a job that wasn't necessarily the most social. Organizations committee, I think she was on Service Corps or something. It wasn't always the glamorous social activities, but it was more the things that needed to be done. So that doesn't surprise me about her. I
Right.
think she's definitely someone who sees a situation and figures out the problem and wants to get it done. So she's just doing that on the grandest scale there is,
now she's really got a job set going.
Talk
Yeah.
about organizing.
Yeah. No, she is amazing, absolutely amazing. Yeah, and her intellect and her ability to get things done and persevere. We've watched that for 25, 30 years now. She can, she just gets up and goes to it, gets a job done.
So when you guys were talking about, you didn't hang out much places, so we have heard a few. So just wanted to know, is there any, like when you would go out to any restaurants or movies or anything, like any particular places that you recall that you guys would go with Hillary or
Was it Boo Boos?
boobies?
Boobies.
Boobies,
Yeah.
boobies, boobies.
And when we were younger, there was a place right next to the Methodist church, and I think, what was that place called? It was like Robin Hood's or something like
Well, we
that.
used to go to the Pickwick
No, the
restaurant.
Pickwick restaurant.
we
Right
went to
next
a
to the
lot.
theater.
We'd go to the movies, and then the Pickwick restaurant was more of a hamburger, french fries,
Right.
Coke sort
Had
of
a
a place.
fountain.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
would go there quite a bit, but
Yeah, the pantry.
boobies,
Wasn't it?
let's go to Boo Boos, boobies.
No, well, what about Romano's?
And
Yeah,
Romano's.
Where we'd go get
Pizza?
pizza?
Just Plains, it's closed
Right.
now too, I think. Well, I think it's actually moved, it's somewhere else.
Okay.
It was on the occasion.
We would
That
go
was
there
it.
sometimes after football
Yeah.
games.
After a
or
football game, we'd go to
Basketball
Romano's.
games.
Yeah.
But I think I've heard Robin Hood's. I
Yeah.
think we'll have to look that up.
Yeah, but it was right next, there was something, and I'm also thinking the pantry, but I think that's another restaurant that wasn't this, but this little restaurant was right next to the Methodist church, and it was I think the worst thing we did there was we used to fool around with salt on the table, leave a mess a little bit.
Take the tops off.
Yeah.
Oh.
But that was definitely the Coke
Did we
and
really do
French fry
that?
place. And then there was, what was it, Globe Records? Where you'd
Yeah,
go and
yeah.
get the records
Yeah,
on
when you'd
a
go in.
Prospect.
Yeah.
That was a big place
Yeah.
for people to go on Saturdays.
The record store
Okay, how about the McDonald's that opened up?
in Des Plaines.
There was a McDonald's that
That's a
opened
big
up.
deal.
Was it Des Plaines?
It was Des Plaines.
The first Golden Arches?
Yeah.
15 cents for a hamburger. So we would, and those were the days when you pulled your car up in, and then you'd eat in your car.
Right.
You know, there was no eating inside. But, you know, a hamburger was 15 cents. I think French fries were 20 cents. It was unbelievable.
Well, what a movie was a quarter.
And
Pickwick.
we would go if you were 12 or under, you could get in for a quarter. And I got in for a quarter even when I was 16 because I didn't look like I was.
They were making me pay full price, and here's my little friend getting in for a quarter.
We've always been like the tall one and the short one, you know.
I have to say one thing, that my mother I have to remember the year. Well, it was 2000, I think. She said to me, Hillary's going to be president. And at that time, I was like, what? I mean, I hadn't thought of it. And
2000, you said?
yeah, right before she died. And she was very insistent upon it.
Mm.
So she ran, which was,
And your mother gave her
and
her earrings.
I gave Hillary this last time, not in 2008, but maybe a year ago, I gave her my mother's earrings because I said, Mom said you're going to be president.
Oh, that's nice.
And she wears them. And the first time she wore them, it made me cry, but, and she was happy to have them, and they're her style, and it was.
Well, tell them about the necklace you made for her too, that we all kind
Well,
of
we
went in
all
on.
did that.
Well, first of all, Bonnie's a jeweler, or a jewelry designer, and
Yeah.
she makes a lot of the jewelry that Hillary wears, the necklaces and the earrings, but then we all
do.
got together and did
Yeah,
something.
yeah, we were going on a girls' weekend, and we said, oh, let's give her something, thank you for being Secretary of State. So I said, okay, I'm going to make her a necklace, we're all going to give it to her. And so they're large pearls, and they have gold. They're not crosses, but they're kind of like crosses. Anyhow, she wears it all the time, and at first when she wore it, we'd all call each other and say, is that our necklace, is that our necklace? And then she wore it with Ralph Lauren, and she wore it with Oscar de la Renta, and she would email
But
me and say they liked your necklace.
These were pearls
Yes,
that Bonnie went all over the place looking
did.
for just the right pearls
right.
and put them together, and they were just beautiful. And then all of her good friends helped
All of us
help
paid for
support
it.
that
Yeah.
now, but
Yeah.
a lot of the jewelry that Bonnie makes,
Thank you.
she wears, and, you know, so we're always like, oh my gosh, she got your necklace. And then I've had to tell about Cheryl too. Cheryl just got a book published this year. And in April, and it's called It's Good to Be Grand, and it's about being a grandparent, and, you know, some of the neat things that you can do, little tips, and what, not only grandmothers, but grandfathers too, as your, you know, grandchild is growing. Just really, really interesting book and neat little tips. But Hillary did the foreword for her book.
So that was interesting because Hillary and our children got married a little later than some of our friends, so we were two of the last to become grandmothers. So I wrote this book because I wanted to know everything that was new, what medical science had found, what parenting philosophies were, and I couldn't find a book like that, so I wrote it. And I started out before my grandson was born, and then was continuing his whole first year. So he was 3 months old when Hillary found out that Chelsea was going to have a baby. And we happened to be together, all of us were out to dinner, and she asked if she could read the book. She wanted to learn those things too, because she was coming up under that moment. So she actually was the first friend to read it in just type form. It wasn't a book yet. And so I said, I was just kind of joking, I said, well, you ought to write the foreword, and she said, I will, and she did. And so she wrote the foreword in about November of 2014 after Charlotte was born, and then the book came out about 6 months later. But I think that the interesting example about that is that that's the kind of friend she is. You know, the foreword she wrote had nothing to do with politics, she hadn't announced yet, but she is able to connect with her friends at a level of friendship that doesn't have to be about politics, doesn't have to always be about her or her race, for a job or whatever. And I know she's done some nice things for you too.
Yes.
But, you know,
about
Cheryl
poetry.
Cheryl
Tell
goes
them.
all over the place and does book signings, and, you know, it's just really cool.
And I have to say that Cheryl, after we have a reunion or dinner, she'll write about it. And she's such a wonderful writer that we all keep it, and it's wonderful. But Patsy has to tell you about Poetry Place.
Oh.
Yes, yes,
Oh, okay, well.
tell the story.
I'm a speech and language pathologist, so I've worked at a school for many, many years with at-risk kids, which means that they're probably 80–85% poverty level. And so I just developed this outdoor learning area to utilize some space that was on the west side of the school that has trees and whatever. So we put in a stage, concrete stage, and about 120 amphitheater seating around. And so the kids can go out there. We've got all kinds of nature types of things like rocks with fossils and squirrel houses and bird houses and bat houses and all different kinds of things, weather sock. But anyway, it was all put together by the community. I mean, I went and solicited everybody and got funds, got in-kind.
You raised all the
kinds
money.
of- kinds
It's
of
your
things,
idea.
But anyway, so we were gonna have a dedication for that outdoor learning area. And I asked Hillary if she would, you know, just write a letter or something for the dedication, which she did, so we read it. But then after that, it won, I don't know if you're familiar with the 1,000 Points of Light Award.
All right.
It won the 1,000 Points of Light Award because that particular award is given to those projects that a community comes together
Yeah.
and benefits the community or the society. So out of like 1,600 applicants, it was, no, 3,600 applicants, there were 16 chosen, and ours was one of them. So that was really nice. So she, you know, she was so nice to write this letter that I read out loud at the dedication, and then she also autographed some of the conceptual architectural designs for the place and the planting place. I mean, she just, you know, it was really nice of her to do that, because I think that meant a lot to her too, because it's kind of like it takes a village sort of a concept for her. So, you know,
She
that was.
she keeps up with what her friends are doing too, and is aware of that, and sometimes we'll go to a big event where sometimes we have a great amount of time with her, and sometimes we have a little bit of time with her. And like in the line where you get a photo, but she'll say, like at that time she might have said to Patsy, well, where's Poetry Place, what's it doing? You know, she has the capacity to keep other people's important things in mind too.
So that's kind of a theme that we've been hearing. As much as it, do you recall, like, as far as during, we've heard a couple stories about how she was helpful to people during, you know, when she was growing up, or there was a problem or situation where she gave advice or any kind of, do you recall anything there or comment about that or anything come to mind? We had one girl, her brother was in trouble at a park district, and Hillary was working at the park district, and
Oh, she used to, yeah, I think, did she work at North Park or something?
South Park.
South Park?
When she came to Park Ridge
Yeah.
to speak at the fundraiser at the Pickwick, she said she was there
South
3
Park,
years or
yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
Well, I can't remember, maybe you can remember things when she was younger, but, you know, just, I guess the word that I would describe Hillary as is grounded. She's very grounded, with her friends. She tries to, and like all of us, I mean, all of us do that. I mean, I try to encourage Bonnie, or she encourages me, or, you know, we just always do that with each other, and she's no different. Only the difference is that she's got a lot on her plate.
Yeah,
And
we
yet
might
she-
even give her a pass if she
Yeah.
wasn't, but we haven't had to.
She's got a lot on her
She's
plate,
busy.
and yet she still finds the time to do it. For example, my husband, for the last several years, has been very ill. He passed away a couple of years ago, but, you know, she knew that, and so she writes little notes to me, and here he's taken a turn for the worse, and I'm thinking about you, those kinds of things, you know, all for 5 years or so, on and off. And of course, then when he passed away, you know, I received a very nice note from her. So she's, you know, she's very sensitive to her friends, and you know, just like we all are, but she's got so much on her plate that it just kind of boggles your mind that she has the presence of mind to do that, you know, but that's the way she is, you know, and so when we hear all of these negative things about her, those of us who are her friends have a real hard time dealing with that, because we don't see that, you know, we know our reality is what we know. And unfortunately, I guess other people aren't privy to the things that we know, but.
And the interesting thing is, we're not the only group of friends she has.
No.
Because a couple of years in a row, when she was Secretary of State, she invited us to the International Women of Courage Day. And this was something, she didn't start, actually, Condoleezza Rice started it, but it was to give out 10 awards to women who had done exceptional things under really difficult odds. So it was women from around the world. It wasn't American women, but it was from Africa and from Iran, and, you know, people that were just, women that were just fighting incredible odds. There was one woman who was the Attorney General of Mexico, and she was fighting the drug cartels down there. And so the State Department did that, but she invited us for several years, and so we got to be in on that fantastic thing in Washington, D.C. And then she had, one of those years, she had a party at her house in Washington, D.C. And so we got to go there to her house, but it was filled with women that have become her friends throughout her life. So some of them we've gotten to know real well, was people that had worked for her, people from Arkansas, people from Wellesley, people from, you know, from New York when she was a senator. It was just the friends that she had made through the years and kept.
And she tends to keep her friends, you know, I mean, people who are her friends stay her friends for a very long time. And if she was this mean, nasty woman, you know, I don't think a lot of us would be around that long. But, you know, even the people that work for her have been with her
Yes.
for such a long time.
People who work for her, we know these people, they've been with her for 25 years. And they came in as interns out of college, and they've never left. And you can't be a nasty woman and keep your friends.
I hate that
I'm
word.
sorry to use that word. But you just can't. I mean, you lose people along the way, if not everyone along the way. So she's anything but that. I mean, I actually have a picture of us in her living room from that time we went out to see the awards. They were amazing.
We ought to put that word nasty in context, because this is an oral history. And the word nasty was used by her opponent. That's why we're using it, you know, because it's
And we're
just-
laughing about it
And we're
because
laughing
it's so
about
silly.
it because it's a ridiculous term for our friend.
Right. Would be what a 12-year-old would use. I'm not biased.
I know there was a reunion at the White House, like 20 years or so. Did all of you attend that reunion?
Yeah, yeah. We were
Could you
there.
tell us a little bit about that?
It was fun.
It was fun.
It
We
was
took
big.
our children.
It was big, and the really neat thing, Bill and Hillary wanted us to bring our families, because they wanted everybody to take a tour of the White House and just have it open for our class. I mean, Maine East and Maine South class, so we had a lot of people at that
Yeah,
reunion.
and our
people
children
brought
got
their
to know
friends.
each other.
And our children got to know each other, plus on that Sunday, I guess it was, they closed down the White House and our class and our kids got to go and see the inside, and it was
At the end, we stood on the grass, and they wanted the kids to see the helicopter take off. So they walked out of the White House, and they got into the helicopter, both of them, and waved everybody and took off. And our kids were younger, much younger then, so they thought that was
They're very family oriented. I mean, there are so many times that we've been with Hillary or Bill, and they'll always say, "Oh, bring your kids," So
Yeah, the inaugurations, both inaugurations.
and then we spent a weekend with her, just the girls, at a little cabin on the lake. Sounds funny, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It wasn't the lake. Yes, it was.
Yeah,
It was the
around
lake.
the other side of Lake Michigan.
Yeah.
That was not too long ago, that was really nice.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago. We spent a long weekend, just the girls.
And then 6 months after they were in the White House, some of us went and stayed overnight in the White House.
Yeah.
And that was such a treat. And I think that what was behind that was she just wanted to share this experience with her friends. She wanted, she didn't want to just be there off by herself with us not knowing what it was like. So we spent a night in the White House and got a tour of pastry kitchen and a dinner that night. And we had watched a movie in the White House theater. So that was really fun.
Yeah, I had never been in the White House before, and then I stayed overnight in the White House. So and I was taking all
Patsy
kinds
was
of...
taking soap
I
and
was
napkins.
I wasn't taking soap and napkins, but I was taking pictures.
Oh,
I mean,
I'm sorry, I thought you were admitting that, all that stuff you took.
People do ask if we took, I've been in the White House and we all have been there, and if we took anything. I did take a paper towel.
Well, they do have the paper towels
It says
with
White
the
House in the
embossed
bathroom.
White House, and a lot of people do that.
I did,
Yeah.
I took them.
But I wasn't taking glasses and silverware.
You don't take glasses and silverware, but what was amazing to me is the White House has amazing art. It has John Singer Sargent's, and things I had learned in history books. So I would go in the other room and I'd see it, and then I'd come running back and I'd say to Hillary, "Do you know you have a John Singer Sargent in there?" And I think she knew. I said, "But it's behind a red chair." I thought maybe she hadn't noticed. And I just was amazed. So I was like, looking on all the walls. So lots could have been going on while I was doing that.
Yeah, I think each of us, we had certain things that we were really interested
Right.
in seeing. I was fascinated by the Secret Service and where they were, all over. Like there was one station, there was a little elevator that went up to the pastry kitchen, and there was one person whose whole shift was sitting there right with the pastry chef. Because of the elevator, I guess. They weren't afraid of the pastry chef, but, but everywhere you turn, there would be Secret Service people. I thought that was pretty fascinating.
And then we would have breakfast and lunch in the solarium, I guess it's called. Is that what it's called? The solarium, which is the top floor. And when you see that railing around the top of the White House, you can't go up there now, but when we were there in
93, because it was 6 months after he came
Okay,
into
so
office,
93, when we were there in 93, you were still allowed to go up there. So we'd eat in the solarium, which was kind of an open glassed room, and then you'd walk out and you'd be on that balcony with, with that real pretty railing, and there were red carnations all around, and all of a sudden you look back up on the top and there's people with AK-47s, and we were just kind of like waving. But now they don't allow people to go up there anymore.
Well, luckily, as we told you, we were really good girls, so we didn't do anything that they were going to be angry about.
But yeah, so, and then, to sit there on Truman's balcony and in that rocking chair, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, think of people
This is history.
Think of other people who have sat in the same chair that I'm sitting in and looking out over the South Lawn, and you think of Truman and Kennedy, and you're sitting there rocking in this chair. Thinking, oh gosh,
They sat here.
yeah, right. So it was quite an experience. We had a great time, and then we've been to some parties there, and that have been
Yes,
lots
we've
of
been to
fun.
some great parties.
Yeah.
One of the first parties I went, I couldn't believe they had this gold server. And so I'm imagining, like in anyone's house, it would not be real. And I just walked over. I guess any artifact for me is something that invites me to investigate. And I went over and I kind of thought, well, if I pick it up, it's really heavy. And a gentleman said to me, please put your hands down. And I was like, oh, do you think this is real? And he said, yes, it's real.
And you're not
From
walking
then
off
I was
with it.
not touching anything.
Bonnie had this purse about this big, and she was kind of sliding it towards her purse.
I think I would have gone for the John Singer Sargent first.
purse wasn't
I'm
that big,
I'm going to bring a big purse next time.
Well, we'll make sure to edit all that.
We're too old to be arrested, aren't we?
Well, I guess in a way, where we digress here and we go into these things, that kind of shows you, and that's not why we're doing it. Hillary, when we're together, she's right in there
Right.
with us, laughing and talking and reminiscing and talking about funny things in our lives now, and that's exactly who she is when she's with us. Same sort of fun and humor and that kind of thing.
She's a good friend, a really good friend. She's consistent and she's happy to see us. When we see her, we know she's happy to see us. It's, I think, a little reprieve from all the work she does. And she works so hard, and she works so hard for everyone. And we don't understand why everyone doesn't see that. She's done that her whole life. She's worked to make the world a better place. And I don't know how anyone could find fault with that.
Yeah, I had a chance not too long ago, just a couple months ago, to really review some of the work she's done. Because after I wrote this book, Good to Be Grand, I became associated with something called Grand Magazine. And it's for grandparents or grandparent age. And this year they decided, I got to know them, so I didn't start it, but I worked with them on it. They named her Grand Person of the Year. And it was not really about who sings the best.
On the cover, she was on the cover.
Yeah, she was on the cover. It wasn't really about who sings the best lullabies or anything. It was about someone who has made a significant difference in the lives of families and children,
Right.
who happens to be a grandparent. And so, her history is amazing in that area particularly. You know, she, from the time she took an internship and she was studying the health and education needs of migrant workers in Arkansas, she founded something to make sure children had the health care and education they needed, and then really is one of the main people responsible for CHIP, which is ensuring, making sure that children have health care and health insurance. And so she has this whole history and has made quite an impact in ways that people have forgotten unless they have a chance to go back
Right.
and look at it.
I wish they'd talked about that more, on the campaign trail and all that she's done. It's amazing. And being so young and being so serious about that and caring, but they don't.
Well, I have heard people say, I think it's people that know her well and support her, have said the way to tell whether someone's authentic is look at what they were doing before anyone was watching them. And that's where you trace that back. And she wasn't preparing to be president there. She was dealing with what was immediately in front of her.
So taking back, like when, is there?
I'm gonna have to use the restroom.
Okay.
The galleries and museums.
Okay. So I know you two went to the same church with her growing up, and could you just touch on maybe like how Don Jones has influenced her, and what her how that kind of faith upbringing and how the things that he helped to expose you to, going downtown to see Dr. King, how you've kind of seen that influence her and how that maybe influenced you growing up and stuff?
Well, I think all of us are sort of the culmination of the experiences that we have. Mm-hmm. Because, you look at Hillary in high school and she was a Goldwater girl. She was very conservative, But there are things that happen to you through your life that sort of start changing your ideas, changing your thoughts about things. And I think that probably our minister, our youth minister, who, by the way, was only there for I think maybe 3 years, because our congregation was a very conservative congregation, and he was really a little bit more liberal than some of the elders in the congregation were approving of. And so when he came along, excuse me, he started, taking us to Martin Luther King, listening to him speaking to some of us. A lot, I in particular had not been outside of Park Ridge a whole lot of my life to really see what was going on the other side. And we only had, we had a very non-diverse high school population. I think we had mostly white children. I don't know if we even had any Asian students. I think it was probably mostly white kids, didn't we, at Maine East and Maine South. And so, our view of the world might have been a little bit different than someone else who lived outside of Park Ridge. So he not only took us to see Martin Luther King speak, which sort of opened our eyes up as to what was going on in the world. What are some of the issues with civil rights? I just don't know that we really grasp that as young people. Living in the community that we lived in, fairly Republican, very conservative community. And I can remember, and Cheryl and I were just talking about this on the way over, after that speech from Martin Luther King, and after that really moving experience of hearing his thoughts on things, and then not only getting to meet him, but Hillary organized some babysitting for migrant workers' children who were just outside of Park Ridge. We had lots of migrant workers I didn't know about, but we did. And we learned about this through Don Jones. We had migrant workers that were just outside of Park Ridge, and so Hillary organized a group of people, a group of students who would go and help babysit those migrant workers. So, that's just a little piece of, something that happens along the way that kind of opens your eyes up to a little bit more. And then we had University of Life, which is kind of like every week we would get together with a group of high school students, and we just sit and talk about some theological kinds of things, some life lessons, some readings, some scriptures, those kinds of things. And like I say, Don Jones was a little bit more liberal, so he kind of opened up those windows and those doors for us a little bit to give us kind of a peek as to what was really kind of going on in the world that we just maybe had been a little bit too conservative to see. After Hillary was out of high school, I can remember I was working for NBC for just a few months for the 1968 Democratic National Convention. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but during that particular convention, there was a lot of uproar in the streets of Chicago. There was a lot of fighting, and because of the Vietnam War, and there were protests, and I was on the inside because I was working for NBC, so I didn't see what was going on the outside. But Hillary and I think Betsy
had gone down.
They told their parents they were going to
the show
a
or
movie or something, and they didn't. They went downtown Chicago, and they observed all of this. So that's another little piece of, okay, so this is happening now, and let me try to get in. Hillary was always probably the kind of person who would want to research this and find out what's really going on here and what are the issues back and forth.
Kind of an awakening, really.
Yeah, it was an awakening, I was a little bit slower than Hillary as far as my awakening, because, she really delved into issues and tried to figure out what was going on. Anyway, so fast forward a little bit, and when she got into Wellesley, and even though Don Jones was no longer part of the Methodist Church, he had left, he went in and taught, and I'm trying to think at which university he was teaching at. He was teaching theology at a university somewhere, but they kept up their communication. He would send her readings and philosophical things that they were sharing back and forth all through her Wellesley years and into Yale. And, I think those kinds of pieces of information and those dialogues that they had back and forth with each other influenced her even more. And so gradually she just sort of, changed her ideas about things, and that happened, I think, in Wellesley. And then, of course, she went to Yale, but she kept up this relationship with our youth minister even when she was in the White House. And I know that, matter of fact, we got to see him. Did you see him when he was he came to the White House one
I remember the
time?
inauguration or something.
Yeah, and I hadn't seen him since we were,
Right.
since we were, 15, 16 years old. I hadn't seen him, and he came to the White House, and that was a whole lot of fun to see him for the first time after all those years. But she had kept contact with him, and I think he even helped her through some of the highs and the lows of things that were going on, in the White House, and helped her spiritually through a lot of difficulties that she had. And so they remained very close friends until he passed away maybe about 10 years ago.
Right.
But, so it's just kind of an evolution of thinking, and you'll probably find that yourselves when you get, you may feel a certain way right now, but through the years you'll have experiences that will influence you one way or the other, and you may totally think something different in another 10 years.
And I don't get the feeling that she was going from here to here in a straight line. It wasn't that she was going from extremely conservative to the other side or anything. I think she was learning to think and weigh things and putting together her own philosophy that probably contains a lot of different parts, some from him, but some from her home life and other experiences. So it just was more about thinking and deciding, evaluating, than it was about adopting a particular philosophy.
And she had the experience of travel and seeing the world, and that changes the way you look at the world and think. And she was already open to that, so, yeah, she's...
We all kind of
Yes,
change through our
evolve.
lives. Yeah, we evolve, that's a good word. And you will too. You'll
Yeah.
find that you will.
So you mentioned the migrant workers.
Mhm.
Did you happen to go and do that?
No, I did not.
Do you know anybody else who did?
I don't. My parents wouldn't let me do it. You see, my parents were very apprehensive about me even going into Chicago, even going to hear
Right.
Martin Luther King speak. There were a lot of parents who just wanted to keep their kids at home and
Sure.
were afraid of letting them, venture out too far because they just were worried about what was out there. So no, I didn't. And I'm not sure who did go,
Yeah.
but yeah.
We were
She
too
was-
busy pom-pomming and
Yeah,
cheering.
she was lucky to have experienced those things.
Well, I think in those days, the people who moved from the city to the suburbs did so to get away from the problems in the city. And so they weren't, I moved out to the suburbs when I was 7 and into Park Ridge. And I know that my parents weren't happy with me going, they didn't want me on my own down in the city because we lived in Rogers Park, and at that time gangs had started. And once that happened, they pulled my brother and I out of school, and that was it. They were gone. And so they were reluctant to go
Sure.
back, although we did. I mean, once we were in high school, we were always in the city then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, like I know you mentioned that she was one of the Goldwater girls. Can you talk about was she very strongly Republican in high school? Like I know you said politics were a big part of who she was, especially in government class. Was that something you saw as really important to her even back then?
Well, I think it was organizationally important. I mean, I'm not sure how much, being her, she probably weighed some of the philosophy and all that kind of thing, but she and this other best friend, Betsy, who you talked to, I think, it was sort of an organizational activity to be presidents of the Youth for Goldwater girls or kids or something like that. So, I don't know how much at that time her philosophy was formed, or whether it was another way to be active, be leadership, be involved.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't think it's any secret that her father was very Republican. So I'm sure, and actually.
Everyone was Republican.
My parents were probably the only ones who were Democrats, I think.
Were they?
Yeah, they were Democrats, but I think just about everybody else in Park Ridge was a Republican. So, you know, I see my own grandchildren now being influenced by what their father thinks and what their
Sure.
mother thinks. And, you know, I try to give them both sides so they can get it fair and balanced, to obey that word. But, you know, so I think, you know, you are influenced by, at least when you're young.
Of course. Your family,
By what your family believes.
And then, of course, Hillary was one of the few to go to the East Coast for college. Most of us went to school, some went to California or other areas, but most of us went to Midwestern schools. And I remember that I had been interested for some reason, maybe they had a college fair or something in Mount Holyoke. She went to Wellesley, and I remember having someone give me the advice that, and my mother was there with me listening to this, that Midwestern girls were really like left out. They were not accepted at Eastern Girls' School. Well, that was enough for me, you know, but Hillary was not to be, I don't know if she heard that same thing, but she was brave, you know, she was ready to go, ready to expand her. And I think that was quite influential in her life, to be there, you know, on the East Coast at an Ivy League school, or a women's school, and then Yale.
So what is your favorite memory of Hillary? Like, I know you've shared a bunch of really good stories, but if you had to like pick one moment that stands out to you, like this is why she's your friend, like what is it?
Well, mine's very recent, so I don't know if recent memories count, but when
Yeah,
we had
anything.
this weekend where we went to the Friends Lake House, and we had our hostess, Patsy, made two requests of us. One is that, this was in 2014, I think, not to ask her about 2016, because everyone was asking her about that.
Whatever you do, don't ask her if
Yeah.
she's running for president.
And don't take pictures, because we just wanted to have a relaxing time.
Right.
You know, it just was her day, her weekend off. So we did that. We were in two houses with a path between them, and the Secret Service guys were in the SUV in the driveway. And we'd go through the path, and we'd say, like, you know, we're fine, don't, you know, we're good. But we just did like girls and women will do, is we had a lot of very long meals around a big table. There were 10 of us there. And we would eat, and then we'd talk for 2 more hours. Then we'd get up and we'd do something for a few minutes, and then we'd go to lunch, and we'd, you know, sit around a table and talk. So we did a little yoga on the living room floor in between meals once. And
Bonnie's the yoga
yeah,
expert.
Bonnie was doing some yoga poses with us, and we've all done it to little bits or a lot or whatever. So Bonnie was showing us. But Hillary had come upon a single nose breathing, which is a yoga thing.
Not as shown.
A cleansing kind of breath that you take. And one of my favorite memories is being there in, you know, yoga clothes or whatever, and she was in very great detail telling us about single nose breathing.
She was describing it, and I actually went home and looked that up. I
Yeah.
forgot
Oh,
about
yeah, no, it's
Till
very,
you mentioned that, I
it's
forgot.
very much a
about
part
it.
of yoga.
Yeah, it's very authentic
Yeah.
and well respected and everything like that, but I just had not heard it before, and I just couldn't stop, you know, laughing at the fact that that's what we were doing.
I would say that would, you know, even though we had been at the White House and all that was kind of fun, but that particular weekend was probably my highlight too, because we walked on the beach. I mean,
Yes.
just, you know, Secret Service is like 2 blocks away.
Following.
Following with their khakis on.
It was very personal.
It was it was very nice. I can remember another time though at the White House, it was fun. It was we had a 50s party, because Hillary was turning 50, so we had a 50, and her birthday is October 26th, so it's always near Halloween, so she likes dress-up parties. So this particular year was her 50th, and so we had a 50s birthday party. So a lot of us got, I rented mine, I don't know if you had one, but I rented a poodle skirt. And so she had a poodle skirt, I had a poodle skirt, and several of us, and big black glasses, and Anyway, it was kind of fun. So that particular moment for me was kind of fun being at that 50s party. But I would say the highlight was probably just spending the weekend, not doing anything, just relaxing, no makeup. You know, I fixed breakfast, which probably wasn't the best breakfast, but
It was a great breakfast.
it was a great, thank you.
It was a great breakfast.
But it was just the sitting around on the table talking, I think. Just,
Yeah, that's a favorite for me too. Just having that amount of time, we're always have a limited amount of time in the last few years, but to have that whole weekend where we could just sit and talk, and we just started at breakfast, and we realized after a number of hours that we had not stood up, and we tried to stand up, and we were like, oh my God, we haven't stood up for hours. And
How
and
are we
then,
gonna go to lunch if we don't do something, right?
yeah, we had to go out and walk or do something, but we just talked about everything and
from
everyone.
high school.
We
Oh.
talked
We
about
talked about
favorite
high
cable
school.
shows, and Hillary
Oh, yes, we
knew a
talked
lot
about-
of the cable shows.
Yes, we said, where do you get time to watch TV? I don't have time to watch TV,
Yeah.
and she
She
likes
said I
some.
relax, you know, that's
Yeah.
how I relax.
She knew the decorating shows, and we
Yeah.
were like,
Fix It.
what?
Pawn
the-"
Stars, you know that one? That was one of her favorites.
Fixer-uppers, though.
The Fixer-Upper show she
Fixer-upper where
liked.
you flip it,
Yeah, flip it or.
fix
Yeah.
it and flip it, or something like that.
But I think for myself, a funny moment was, you probably all saw this, the SNL, when she was on
Oh.
Saturday Night Live, and it's
Was
Kate
the
McKenna.
bartender? Was she the bartender?
She was the
Yeah.
bartender.
Yeah.
And so I'm watching it, just kind of really not paying attention, and then Hillary turns around. And I started to laugh, and I couldn't stop laughing. And then one of the other gals was played by Huma, who we all know and love. And so the next time I saw Hillary, I think her name was Val. She was
Yes,
Val,
Val.
the
Val.
bartender.
Yeah.
So I started calling her Val. And when I saw her, I couldn't stop laughing. The whole SNL skit came back, and I said, you know, you might have another profession. If this doesn't work out, you know, you might think of acting, there's, you know, bartending. I could not stop laughing, and she could not stop laughing.
At the end of that, though, she sang, do you remember? She sang, and I think when she was writing the foreword for Cheryl's book, wasn't she talking about when Charlotte, you know, because Hillary cannot sing, she's
No,
not a good
neither-
singer.
yeah.
And so she was, what did
Well,
she
so
say?
she said when Chelsea got a certain age, she would say, she'd put her finger on her lips and she'd say, no, mommy, don't sing. No sing.
No sing, mommy, no sing.
And so Hillary said in the foreword, so now I have someone else who likes my singing, at least for a while.
Yes.
But yeah, I remember that skit she sang, and I thought
Wasn't
about
that the greatest?
Yeah.
I just thought it was hysterical. And she's a good sport, and she has a great sense of humor, and I don't think people know that about her. And she doesn't have the chance to show it, I don't think. But she was hysterical.
So listening to all your guys' stories, we've learned that Hillary was really supportive of you guys, and you've all managed to stay in touch. Have you guys ever done anything to like support her in her maybe campaign towards presidency or anything? Have you guys ever heard of a group called Friends of Hillary? I think.
Yeah.
Was that Alita Blacks?
Well, Friends of Hillary was started long before she even ran. Because I remember it was a group of people that were starting to raise money because they were trying to encourage her to run by getting a lot of people excited about her possible candidacy. And I remember, I hate to say emailing, but I remember emailing her and saying, do you know of this Friends of Hillary that's raising money? Do you know that they're raising money? Because I thought, well, maybe she didn't know, and these people were doing this on the side. And she said, oh, no. She said, I know that they are. And she said, you know, if I do decide to run, you know, they'll probably be able to take a lot of credit for that because I haven't decided yet. And she really hadn't. A lot of people think that she knows she's going to run, but she didn't, did she? She really didn't. So that's what the Friends of Hillary, it was like the beginning grassroots kind of fundraising effort to, you know,
Yeah,
say.
there was also something called Ready for Hillary that was.
Yeah.
Alita Black
Yeah.
started that.
But we went, one of the everyone has been to different campaign events through the whole thing, but we did go to Iowa for the caucuses in 2008. 2008.
We've been 2008
Yeah.
and 2000.
And Patsy and I caravaned to Iowa, and it was the
The
caucuses-
blizzard of the year.
Yeah, the caucuses
Blizzard
were
of the
on
year. Terrible.
January 2nd, so we were driving on New Year's Day, and the roads out west, towards Iowa were basically 2 tire tracks. And we laughed. I remember saying, "I'm going to die for Hillary."
Or we repeated, she really owes us.
It was like driving on an ice skating rink. It was like driving on an ice skating rink, and
And we met.
could not see
Yeah.
in front of you.
No.
We
There were more
going
cars
10
in the
miles.
ditch
Yeah.
than there were on the road.
And we're
And
thinking,
Betsy was driving.
what are we doing?
Yeah, but we
Gotta really
made
love a
it.
friend to do
We've
this.
been out to Iowa so many times that I'm sure we love Iowa, but we will never probably see it again.
Well, it was a really great experience, though, into the process.
Oh, it is.
To see a caucus is amazing, and the way that all works.
And shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Did you
because
say
it's
what?
very, it's shocking,
Oh, I
because
thought
it's
you
just
said
very.
shopping.
No, no, but the fact that people just are in a room and then you go stand under the sign of the person who's running, and somebody comes along with a clipboard and you raise your hand and they count how many people for Hillary, and
Yeah.
it was
And then
shocking.
they-
And
and then-
don't go to the bathroom, because
Yeah.
if you weren't there when your hand,
And somebody, Obama or John Edwards or something, they were passing out cookies, which seems sort of like cheating, right? Give people chocolate chip cookies for their vote.
yeah, well, we were trying to bring some to our side too. Betsy and I were working very hard to talk to
Cookies or
particularly the
people?
women. Well, if I had had cookies, I would have been happy to hand them out. Whatever it took, but we just said, you're a woman, how do you feel about a woman running? And there were big families there, and they were arguing amongst themselves, and they were split all over the room. And that's a good thing, when people think for themselves. But it was surprising how basic that is. They say they're gonna do away with that.
The whole caucusing process, I'd never understood it until we went in 2008. And then when we went in 2016 to partake in the caucus part again and go door to door and canvass and all those kinds of things, I did a lot of that. You were there in
Lot of-
2016?
Yes. a
So,
lot of door to
anyway,
door.
so we were going door to door, and the interesting part, or the bad part about caucusing is the day of the caucus, you only have 2 hours to get there and vote. I think it's if you're not there
Yeah.
between 5 and 7, they close the doors.
Right.
So if you are not there at 7 o'clock, they close the doors and you cannot vote, period. And so you think about all of the people who have evening jobs, they can't caucus and they can't vote. I can't
The
tell you.
elderly.
I can't tell you the people that I knocked on their doors and they said, oh, we would be voting for her, but my wife is ill and I have to stay home with her. She just got back from the hospital. So, both of them, they couldn't go. You have a child that's sick. I mean, there are so many things. You have a disabled person. We did a lot of, driving where we could for people if they
So
needed
you're
a
saying
ride.
that to get, people have to physically get there, and that's a drawback to getting everyone
You
to
have
do
to
it.
Right.
physically be in the room, and it's in your neighborhood too. So everyone in your neighborhood knows who you're voting for, which is really strange. So, because they have all of the, the Trump people, or this was for the primary, but they have these people here, and these people here, Hillary's people. And you have to go into the room of the person that you're voting for. Everybody in the community sees which room you're going into. And if this room doesn't have 15%, then they all have to go to another room. And then and you try to talk them into coming into your, it's just a very bizarre way
Basic.
of doing things.
Yeah, primitive.
It seems primitive.
And it's so
there are
unfair to
so many people
those-
can't get there to
It's
vote.
it's
That's what
unfair
we
to those
found.
people, and a lot of them are minorities and poor people.
Yeah,
that
they
cannot
can't
there to
they
vote.
can't vote, because they can't get there. As Patsy was mentioning, for one reason or another, they cannot vote. So it was funny, one
So
family.
it's frustrating, but-
They have to fix that.
Yeah.
It's very unfair, because your voice isn't heard.
Right. Right.
Gee, that was a long answer to a question.
I'm sorry you asked that question.
What was the question? Do we campaign or anything for her, right?
Well,
Yeah, well,
you
we
know,
have tons of campaign
what we do
stories,
is
but
we go to a lot of events. There were a lot of events in Chicago. Maybe someone would have something in their home and they'd have like maybe 100 people. And it's a fundraiser, and some of them are pretty hefty fundraisers. We just give once, and then we can go to all of them, because we like to be there, and I think Hillary likes us to be there. And then we can talk amongst people that are there about her. But yeah, we've gone to lots of events in Chicago, and I know in 2008,
oh, lots out of
Iowa,
yes.
Indiana, Kentucky,
Kentucky.
Texas,
Lots of them out of the state.
Illinois, of course. But so, yeah, we've done a lot. And we get tired. And so we look at her and we think, how does she do this? I'm not even having to talk, you know.
No, it's very
We're
tiring.
just so tired.
Any other questions or? Okay. Well, I think this has been very fantastic. You guys are great because you're not talking over each other and everybody gets, I think it worked out much better than I think we expected.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean you had low expectations?
Oh, well, you got three people, we
I
usually
love that.
three at once.